This is the Comics Alternative, episode 298, our 6th annual Thanksgiving show. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative. I'm Derek.
And I'm Sterg, and we're two guys with PhDs talking about comics.
And this is our annual Thanksgiving episode where each of us talk about the things that we're thankful for in terms of comics and comics culture. But before we get to that, we want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative is brought to you by the great folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to dcbservice.com for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you'll find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts can be anywhere from 20 to 35% off the cover price. And every single month, you'll find specials that are just unbelievable. Sometimes those prices will be at 45% off the cover price, sometimes 50% off cover, but every now and again, you can find discounts that are even more impressive than that.
That's right, Derek, and I'm thankful that they are our sponsor.
That's right. That's the first thing we're thankful for. Yeah, you really can't beat the great prices at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to dcbservice.com for all of your comics pre-ordering needs, and after you do get your titles there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you.
With turkey in your belly.
That's right. Well, Sterg, before we get started, I guess a couple of apologies. We haven't been on the air, so to speak, for the past few weeks, and that's on me. I've had to deal with a number of family issues, and so I haven't been around or able to do the shows, but we're picking up now, and we're going to continue for the rest of the year. Barring any unfortunate issues. So we're happy to be back, especially with our annual Thanksgiving show.
And as far as I'm concerned, you got nothing to apologize for. Life happens, and podcasts are there sometimes, and you got to deal with family. You got to deal with what you got to deal with.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And the other thing I want to apologize for is my sound on this episode. I am currently out of town with my family in Frisco, Texas, and so I don't have my regular equipment in the studio. I'm working from a laptop, and unfortunately, when I left home, I forgot to bring my adapter that will allow me to plug in a USB to my MacBook Pro. So I'm using a built-in microphone to my MacBook, which, usually I don't think sounds as good, at least in my experience in the past. So please excuse my sound. Now, Sterg sounds fine, as usual.
Hey.
I think I sound a little more muted and maybe tinny. I don't know. But, I hope you can understand me and put up with the sound this time around.
Hey, and if not, we'll be better next time.
Tomorrow's Thanksgiving.
Turkey and dressing and pie and cake.
And fruit salad and whipped cream and cranberries. Gee, I can hardly wait. Me too.
Okay, let's get started with our annual Thanksgiving show. And what we do every year for our Thanksgiving episode is to kind of in a free-form way talk about what we're thankful for in terms of comics and comics culture. Mm-hmm. So let's start with you, Sterg. What is one thing that you were thankful for this year in terms of comics?
One thing I'm thankful for is it's a big thing. I have a big umbrella thing I'm thankful for, and then a whole bunch of little I don't know, things that go under the umbrella. What, mini umbrellas?
You're thankful for umbrellas?
I know. See, yeah. I'm really into the penguin.
There you go.
No, I'm thankful for just comics in general right now. It's one of those things that my pinned tweet on my Twitter account is that, the golden age of comic books was in the 40s, but now is the golden age of comics because there's just so many comics out there nowadays and so many formats and by so many different types of creators and genres. And I mean, to me, that's just, this is a great time to be a comics fan because, we're not like, 20 years ago where it was like you were relegated to the basement or hiding out or, you had to find some like-minded friends via the mail system. Or if you were lucky at the comic shop that you go to, now it's like there are so many different ways that people can share comics, talk about comics, even get and make comics. That it's mind blowing. I mean, just this podcast and how it has all those multiple, the web show, the manga show, the European comic show, the weekly show, the children's show. I mean, that's just a slight indication of just how much is out there. And to me, it's like it's a great time to be a comics fan. That's what I'm saying.
Well, it's a great way to get started.
I'm very positive today.
You are. Well, the first thing that I wanted to mention that I'm thankful for, and this is rather targeted as opposed to your broad umbrella comment, is I am thankful that we have a new series by Inio Asano, Dededede Demon's Dededede Destruction. I'm a really big fan of Inio Asano. I loved his Goodnight Pun Pun series. And so this year we have, I think, the first 3 volumes of Dededede Demon's Dededede Destruction. And I like to say that, by the way. Now, I've read the first 2 volumes, but I haven't yet gotten my hands or received what I ordered through Discount Comic Book Service, our sponsor, Volume 3, which came out last month. So, I'm thankful that we have a new series from Inio Asano. And I don't know, are you a fan of Asano's?
I literally have read the first volume of Goodnight Pun Pun, and that is the extent. And I liked it. I think I bought it because of the review y'all did with it. And I read the first volume. I've got it in a digital version. I think I read it on Comixology or Amazon or something like that. And I just haven't. I liked it. It was strangely moving in ways I did not expect it to be.
Yeah. And he's got an unusual art style, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Where parts of it are much more realistic looking, and that's mixed in with the kind of cartoony stuff.
And there's, are there 8 books, I think, in the whole series? Yeah.
And the 8th one came out last year, I believe.
So it's another one of those. I liked it, and I have a huge pile. I have a backlog of things that I'm going to read one day. I promise you. I'm just going to read them all.
And by the way,
keep buying them.
Yeah. And by the way, we should mention, because I mentioned I really enjoy Dededede Demon's Dededede Destruction. This is not what we will do for our very last episode of the year, our favorites for 2018. Right. Now, there may be some overlap, so I may or may not say that Dededede Demon's Dededede Destruction is one of my favorites of this year. But Thanksgiving, this is what I'm thankful for. A new series from Inio Asano.
I hear you. See, you're just teasing us now. You just say, it sounds like, what's it, Twiggy on the old Buck Rogers show? Well, old in the 80s Buck Rogers show.
Beady. I think that's the first time that anyone has mentioned Tweaky on this podcast.
Hey, you know what? I'm here to just break barriers, is what I'm here
Congratulations, my friend.
Thank you. I'm thankful for Charles Forsman is who I'm going to be thankful for.
Oh.
Just because I just read recently Bastard, the book by Max de Radic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, see, I don't pronounce it right. But my issue, which was originally came out as mini comics from Charles's Chuck. I think I call him Chuck if I'm friendly with him. His Oily Comics imprint, and I support him on Patreon too. And he puts out, I give him $3 a month or something like that, and he makes a mini comic pretty much every month and sends it out, which just makes me happy to get a comic in that format. And right now he's doing this series called Automa. Automa. And I think it's up to issue 6 or 7. And it's just, I just love his comics. They're just, they're brutal. They're horrible. They make me respond in ways that I don't like. But like a bad 70s exploitation movie, like that kind of feel to me. although it's updated and it's kind of got a modern twist on it. And I'm making it sound bad, but it's actually very good. And his comics I find very moving. And I just love that he puts it out kind of in that old school, like, I'm going to put out a mini comic a month kind of way. And he collects them all. I mean, he did the same thing with I Am Not Okay With This, which is, I think, the book that he came out with this past year, which is kind of a weird version of like Carrie, but starring a little girl who looks sort of like Olive Oil. And I mean, but she's got mental powers, and it goes into really weird places. But I just like the fact that, you know, there's creators out here doing things like Charles is doing, and, you know, putting out comics on his own terms, and also finding success in kind of getting them collected into books by good publishers. Mm-hmm. And also, I mean, he's even got a TV series with the BBC, the End of the Fucking World, which I really like that series. And I think that series was kind of the direct inspiration for Bastard, which is that book I was just talking about that I really enjoyed. So I'm just thankful he's out there inspiring people and doing his work, and kind of, I don't think he's doing the publishing arm as much with the oily comics, but I'm thankful that he did it for a while he did.
Yeah. You know, I'm Not Okay With This, but I haven't read it yet. But I'm with you on End of the Fucking World, or Effing World, whatever you want to call, or however you want to name it.
WF. Or I switched some of those letters around.
I really enjoyed, because that was originally a series, but I've got the book, and I really enjoyed that. And I did like that Netflix series.
Yeah. The Netflix series was surprisingly, I was like, how different. Are they going to do this? What's that?
It was different.
It was different, but it was also, I was pleased with it, because, you know, I'm not one of those, like, the adaptation has to be, you know, true to the original, like 1,000,000%.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Yeah.
But I was like, how are they going to do this and do any justice to the book? But they did.
Yeah.
And they're going to keep it going, from what I understand. There's going to be a second series of it.
Oh, another season.
That's what I've heard.
Cool.
So that's something else to be thankful for.
Mm-hmm. Well, another thing that I'm thankful for, and this is weird because this is another manga reference, is Naoki Urasawa's 20th Century Boy Perfect Editions. Now, and I mention this because this year I finally decided to crack down and read all of 20th Century Boys, which is an incredibly long series. Mm-hmm. And it is, I think, my favorite Urasawa story ever. And I've read a number of Urasawa narratives, like Master Keaton, Monster, others. But I really enjoyed 20th Century Boys. And the thing is, as soon as I get all of the signature editions of 20th Century Boys and read the series, then Viz decides to come out with perfect editions. And I love the perfect editions because the perfect editions are basically two signature editions in one. And also it's kind of a nice package. Now, Master Keaton and Monster are both in signature editions, and I appreciate perfect editions, and I appreciate that. And I've got those. But I am glad that I went ahead and read the entire series, because if I waited until all of the perfect editions of the series came out, because this is a very long series, I'd be waiting a long time. But I'm thankful that Viz is coming out with perfect editions of 20th Century Boys.
Yeah, I really love that series too. I actually bought, I have like all 22 volumes, and then the other two on the 21st Century Boys.
Yeah. I
read them that way. And
so you've read the series as well.
Yes. Oh. I'm with you. I loved those. Those were, I love that whole manga convention of, well, you're going to read a long series, and about a third of the way through, we're just going to throw out the window the scene, the milieu that you're used to, and we're just going to go in a whole different area.
Yeah.
I mean, related, but different.
And it's interesting that the first two things that I mentioned that I'm thankful for this year, are books by Inio Asano and Naoki Urasawa, because those are two of my three favorite manga creators right now. The other is Teo Matsumoto. So those three are like the triumvirate for me of contemporary manga creators.
See, I'm I'm woefully behind on my manga. Basically, I read anything by Urasawa, and I read old manga. Actually, I'm still reading through. I'm pulling it off my desk right now. Urasawa Yatsura. It's in America. It's called Lum. It's about the tiger bikini alien who meets the unluckiest man on Earth or boy on Earth. I guess he's a teenager, and she falls in love with him and she wants to marry him, but he's plagued by demons, literally plagued by demons. So it's like a comedy. If you saw it, you would know what it was.
Okay.
But it's one of the first comics. It's one of the first manga I remember being adapted into English. Back in I think Viz had some kind of partnership maybe with Eclipse Comics back in the 80s. And all of this to say, I haven't read a whole lot of manga. I've read basically Urasawa Yatsura. I've read most of Appleseed, I would say, which that's kind of dated too. And then I've read Monster. I liked Pluto a lot.
Yeah, Pluto was great. Yeah, and that was relatively contained, right? Not that many volumes.
I think that's why I liked it, because I know it's got that whole kind of adaptation of Astro Boy flavor to it, but his is, if you hadn't read the Astro Boy, you wouldn't know much about. I don't think it would affect the reading experience at all. Like you would, it's still good. I think it reflects, like you said, it's relatively short. Monster I liked, but there were some of those volumes in the middle. I'm like, just come on. You're in a house and you're talking. And he did bad things in this house. He did bad things in a lot of houses. Let's get to the chase. But I still like the series. And we're thankful. I'm thankful for him too. Yeah.
What else are you thankful for this year?
I'm thankful for the Nib, the website, and They publish political cartoons, and they're definitely left leaning in terms of their politics. But they also publish a lot of nonfiction comics online. And recently, they started a print magazine, and the first issue is out, and it's about 110 pages, I'd say.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's you can actually sign up. It's not called the subscription. It's called joining the Inkwell Society, and they're pitching it as kind of supporting online comics creation. So if you join that society, they'll send you. They're going to publish quarterly. So I think if you join now, you could still get the first issue is death. They're all themed. I think the next one is going to be family. But they are, it's full of like political comics. It's got sections to it. There's a section of kind of like the things that you would expect in a magazine, like letters to the editor and specific columnists. And then it turns into some longer pieces where, there's some, I won't say like feature art. They're kind of like feature articles, I guess. In the first issue, there are things like things that tech millionaires or billionaires are putting a lot of money into longevity studies, like figuring out ways to make people live, much longer than they do now, which that was kind of fascinating. And there was another article about the history of lethal injection, which is not as scientifically established as you would imagine. Basically, this one warden came up with the idea in the 70s and started doing it, and other states were like, sure, that sounds humane. And the reality is it's not really any of the things that you think it is, according to this article. And there's lots of other things. And then the last third of the book are more like one page. I won't say they're all gags, but they tend to be more humorous, but some are more observational kind of comics. And there's a lot of creators good creators, like Emmy Guinness is in it, and Joey Allison, who I really like, and Andy Warner did one of the longer ones, and Matt Bors does the whole thing. He's the editor, and I think he does the letters to the editors, because those are illustrated too. But even if you don't get the print version, if you go online, I think they publish 2 or 3 comics a day. And those are the things they're showing up in the print comics. Some of them, it's like a selection. So I really love that site. it just, I don't know. I'm not going to say it's like the comics version of like the Daily Show or something like that, where it like keeps me feeling like I'm sort of informed. And plus it's comics, and some of the comics aren't necessarily political, and I really enjoy reading them. And Mike Dawson, I really love Mike Dawson's comics. And he's in it, once a month, maybe twice a month. And
he's a cool guy. We've had him on the show before.
Yeah, and I've listened to his interviews because I really enjoy his comics, and he's kind of occupying a really kind of unique place for me. He's just kind of out there doing his thing, and I'm glad that he's one of the people there. And they have several people that are kind of in that. I mean, I'm not going to say in that vein, but just in the vein of comics creators who are out there kind of doing their thing. And I'm glad that there's a collective place where they're I can see their work on a fairly regular basis. So check out the Nib.
Okay. Well, another thing that I'm thankful for in the past, I think that I've mentioned 2 or 3 times that I'm thankful for publishers like Fantagraphics and Drawn and Quarterly. And I am, but this year I want to mention New York Review Comics. I have been, and I think they've been around for about 3 years now, and I have become more and more impressed with what they do. I mean, this year alone, they have published The New World, Comics from Mauritania by Chris Reynolds, Yellow Negroes and Other Imaginary Characters by Yvonne Alagby, Piero by Edmund Badoin, Slum Wolf by Tedeo Tsuge, and I think most recently The Labyrinth by Saul Steinberg. I mean, that's a lot. And most of these books we've discussed on the show in one series or other. I mean, really good stuff. And not only is it great comics, but wonderful packaging. Do you read many New York Review comics?
I don't think I've read any. I know that you've reviewed a couple because I've listened to a few of the reviews.
Oh,
just
many
from the
more than a
titles
couple, my friend.
Right. Well, the ones I've listened to.
Yeah.
That's the ones that ring out to me. But yeah.
Yeah. A great publisher. I think they're doing more and more impressive work. And I highly recommend New York Review Comics to anyone that's listening if you're not already familiar with them.
Hey, I'm counting myself in that list. I'm gonna have to put some of them on my list. Lists. It's all lists. I will say this has nothing to do with, well, it has to do with lists, but not really comics. Do you know the Book of Lists? Do you remember the Book of Lists?
I remember hearing about it, and I may have seen it, but I don't remember much about it.
It's one of those things that if I see it at a flea market, I buy it pretty much every time I see it.
Why? Because you keep losing your copies?
No, I just have multiple copies of the thing because you're usually like a quarter. That's part of it too. I'm like a quarter. I can read it, and but it's on a shelf, and it's the one book that my kid consistently pulls out. The 1-year-old like crawls around and pulls things out of things, but he always pulls out the Book of Lists, which the last page has Fran's list on it. So there you go. I'm just talking about lists. Okay. Let's talk about one thing I'm thankful for is actually kind of related to work. This past week, last week, actually, when we're recording this, the National Council of Teachers of English, they meet for their annual conference, and I did not go. But immediately following, they have an assembly on literature for adolescents, which is called ALAN, and that's a conference that follows right afterward. And every year, I get jealous of my colleagues because at the beginning of ALAN, if you attend, they give you a box of 30 books, like for free. And it's like kind of like the best of like the YA books of the last or the coming year. It's like they're all very contemporary. And one of the complaints that people have had is that how come there's no graphic novels in there? And this year there were 2 graphic novels, at least 2. I mean, I look at book spines and try to figure out if they're graphic novels or not, but 2 of them jumped out at me. One of which was Tilly Walden's On a Sunbeam, which we talked about on the show when we interviewed her. Yeah. And that's a great book. So I'm glad that that's out there and getting in English teachers' hands, even if they don't know what graphic novels are. I think that's a great one for their kids and for them to also kind of read. And also Jarrett Krasaska's Hey Kiddo is in there too. So that's a book. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
No.
He's he's an interesting creator. He's what he's most known for is books for really little kids. He did the Lunch Lady series, which
okay, yeah, I know. I haven't read him, but I know of the Lunch Lady series.
So he's the guy who created Lunch Lady, and he also does some, I think, Jedi Academy, which are like for little kids. But Hey Kiddo is more of it's pitched at a YA audience, like a young adult audience. But I read it, and it's one of my, I'm not going to tip my list either, mister. But it's one of the books that I really enjoyed, and it's an autobiography about how he grew up. Basically, he was raised by his grandparents because his mother was a drug addict, and his father, he never met his father until he was a teenager. And so it's kind of like this interesting story of, him trying to figure out his way in the world, and how his grandparents, they had their own issues, but they still loved him and took care of him. And what's more, they when he asked one year, they were like, you can have anything you want. And he asked for art lessons, and I think he grew up in Worcester, Massachusetts, and they would drive him out to like the local museum and get him art lessons. And it's kind of like the thing that inspired him to do what he does. So I really love those books. So I'm glad that those two things are getting included in, kind of the, I don't know, a collection of, exemplary books for adolescents and for people that are teaching those kids to share with them. So I'm glad that there's more graphic novel presence. I kind of cringe at like, because I don't know, we've talked a little bit about this, or I've heard you guys talk about it, especially at Heroes Con when we're there, because there's almost always that comics, that graphic novel canon thing where it's like, okay, if there's going to be a graphic novel, it's going to be Mouse, or it's going to be Persepolis, or it's going to be American Born Chinese, or Fun Home, right? Yeah. There's like, okay, you could teach one of those four, because those are the good ones. All the rest are whatever. But so I'm kind of glad that there's more stuff getting represented, contemporary stuff. Not to say the other ones aren't good. It's just that, there's so many books out there, and there's so many excellent books out there. So I'm glad to see them getting represented. And, I'm hoping that they don't just turn into, like, oh, yeah, we're going to teach those, Hey Kiddo or On a Sunbeam. I mean, you could do worse. But,
yeah. And there's much more great stuff out there than the usual suspects. And I think one of the dangers, and I think I've mentioned this on the show at least one or two times, one of the dangers of educators, especially those in children's and adolescent lit, who aren't familiar with comics today, they gravitate toward those that get a lot of attention. And in fact, I had a colleague at a former university that I taught at, and her specialty was children's and adolescent lit. And she included on the syllabus Mouse. Now, nothing wrong with Mouse, but is this something you want to use in a children's lit course?
Right.
I don't know.
Right. I know. And I like Mouse a lot, but as comics,
it sucks all the air out of the room.
Yeah, it's not. I've had it. I'm teaching my graphic novel class this coming semester, and I purposely left Mouse out of it because the first time or the second time I taught it, I had Mouse, and it kind of, like you said, sucked all the air out of the room. Like, it kind of, like, everyone wanted to talk about Mouse, but they don't want to talk about Mouse as comics because it's not a lot to talk about in terms of, like, the comics part of it. They want to talk about the story and how it's important, and, it's about the Holocaust, and I get that. But, it's I also want to talk about what's comics, what works in comics and things like that, because I don't know, it didn't have a lot of, like, it had room for discussion, but the discussion part wasn't, it wasn't quite where I wanted it to be, if that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, it's interesting that you mention a conference as what you're thankful for, because the next thing on my list are conferences. And I'm thankful for conferences like Heroes Con and Small Press Expo that deal solely with comics and isn't like pop culture in general. And I know that there are other conferences that are like this. I've never been, but I've heard Emerald City is like this, where the emphasis is solely on comics. Now, I have nothing against conferences like Wizard World and others where you have comics and then movies, games, and everything else.
Right.
The problem with those kind of conferences is that comics are overshadowed. And in fact, I used to attend, the Dallas Comic Con.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things and I know some of the creators who table there, they have a problem with it because they feel that they're shoved aside because of the other big stuff, right? So TV, film, internet, gaming, things of that sort. Again, I have nothing against those conferences. I attend them whenever I can, but I much prefer conferences like Small Press Expo and Heroes Con that the emphasis is solely on comics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I echo that. I go to Heroes Con and I love Heroes Con.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's where
I
we
agree
met.
with you. That's what brought us together.
That's right.
We'll always have Heroes Con, baby. Sorry, I've been listening to that Gilbert Gottfried podcast. He does all the voices. It just gets into my head. But I agree with you. I go to the Knoxville has a couple cons and they have comics, and one's called a Comic Con and one's called like a fanboy expo. And that's more, like you said, media stuff. And, there's not a lot there that I'm super excited about, like most of the time, just because I'm not into the video games. And I do or the whatever, the movies. And, I don't want autographs from people that have, were in a show 30 years ago that I don't really watch, but it has fans like that. But I like the comic stuff. Like you said, I don't like it when it gets overshadowed. When I lived in Athens, they had a great, mini comic, meeting every year called Fluke that I really like. Yeah, Fluke, Fluke. I think they have it in April. So if you're anywhere near Athens, Georgia, and it's April, check out Fluke. It's basically kind of small. It's like in a concert venue, but there's lots of tables set up, and there's lots of mini comics creators, and there's a bunch of people that are based there that are like Eleanor Davis and Drew Wang. They're there, and my friend Patrick Dean, and he's there, and he makes good comics. So there's like a kind of critical mass of these indie creators that kind of live there and make things. So there's always good stuff to pick up, but then there's lots of other people that kind of gravitate because once in a while their friends will come or people in the nearby areas. So that's like a comics thing though, you said, but specifically even mini comics. So I really love that kind of environment like you were describing. So I'm going to be thankful for that too.
Good.
So I'm going to jump to something that actually happens every time I go to Heroes Con. I go to the TwoMorrows Press and I subscribe to Back Issue Magazine. I could do it online, but I'd rather go see the editor and say hi to him and subscribe when I'm at Heroes Con.
That's a good one, TwoMorrows Press. I enjoy what they do.
Yeah, they have lots of good things. I mean, they have lots of books about creators. They have historical, they've been doing a bunch of books I've been meaning to get, kind of like comics by decades now. So they're looking at Marvel and DC comics. There's a 60s book and a 70s book and I think an 80s book, and they're doing it that way, which I think is interesting. I read Back Issue Magazine, which kind of looks at Bronze Age. I think comics from mostly the 70s and 80s, which are kind of my heyday of reading superhero stuff. So it's nice, but they go all over the place. The last issue I read, I'm not up to date on the latest issue is about the Superman movie, actually, the Christopher Reeves one. It's got lots of different things having to do with that. But the last issue I read was about fist fighters. So there was a bunch of stuff about Muhammad Ali in comics, which I thought was really interesting. And the whole Kung Fu fad with Master of Kung Fu and Iron Fist and Richard Dragon and Bronze Tiger and all these, before we actually paid attention to other cultures and read their actual texts, the kind of appropriation that was going on. Mm-hmm. I thought it was really interesting to kind of read that and to kind of read how people were pushing back on it too. Because I think it was Jerry Conway was talking about Iron Fist and he didn't want to, I think he ended up writing Master of Kung Fu because he didn't want to do the book about the white guy who was good at karate. He wanted to do the book about like the guy who actually grew up in karate, but he was a white guy doing it. So I don't know. It's probably all problematic. But it's just interesting for me to kind of, look at that world and think about what it was like compared to today. And kind of, for me, that's also got some nostalgia to it, because those are some of the comics or things I like, and they do theme issues. So, like there's an Archie issue that came out not that long ago. There's an Aquaman issue that came out. So I like that magazine a lot. And they have other things. I mean, Alter Ego is, I know that in the past we've talked about, or I've listened to people talk about, I know Kunka has talked about, fandom was kind of like research on comics before it was formally recognized as research on comics. And, Roy Thomas's Alter Ego and stuff like that. I mean, TwoMorrows publishes a lot of stuff that's kind of, I think, in the spirit of that type of fandom and fanzine publication, but it's a little bit more contemporary. It's got a lot more polish. So I really appreciate their books.
Have you checked out, I think it's their latest magazine, Retro, God, I can't remember the title.
Retro Fan.
Retro Fan, yes. Have you checked that out?
I haven't read it, but I have a friend that we usually go to Heroes Con, and he couldn't go this year because he had a family vacation. So he's a Hulk fan, and the first issue had a big feature on Lou Ferrigno. So I picked that up, and he doesn't have it yet, but he's going to get it when I see him.
Yeah, and the thing about that magazine is that it deals with, culture in a larger sense, right? So it's retro stuff. So, you grew up in the 60s or 70s. Maybe even the 80s to some degree. That's what this magazine focuses on. So you mentioned, the Hulk and Ferrigno, also like maybe toys, games, and comics as well.
Yeah, I like them in general. I think they had, I forget what it was called. It was something a go-go. They had a collection. It was kind of like yeah. And in fact, I interviewed the editor of that book. That's right.
Oh, what's it called?
I listened to that. I remember that.
Not Monster A Go-Go. That's a movie. But God, what is the title? I'm blanking now that you mentioned this. If I were thinking about this off the top of my head, I'd come up with a title. But now that I'm on mic,
Hero A Go-Go.
Hero A Go-Go. That's right, and it deals with kitsch.
Yep. That's right. See, I think Mike Urey.
Yes, Michael Urey, who's a great guy. And in fact, I've interviewed him a couple of times, I think when Hero Go-Go came out, but I also interviewed him briefly at Heroes Con because of that Retro Fan, which he edits.
Yeah, he edits back issue too. So he does a lot of stuff that we like. Yeah,
and North Carolina boy.
That's right. Yeah,
he grew up in Concord, which is right near Charlotte.
See, he's local and has good taste.
Now, my next one, the thing that I'm thankful for in comics, is probably predictable. But I want to throw it out there because I am very thankful for him. And that's Craig Yoe and the kind of work that he does. And again, it's predictable because we have had him on the show innumerable times. And in fact, we had planned on talking with him about a month or so ago, but we may wait until January 1st or the 1st of January. For the past few years, our first episode of the year is an interview or another interview with Craig Yoe, and we call these our Happy New Yoe shows. So you have that to look forward to. But this year alone, he has put out, maybe among others that I'm forgetting, We Spoke Out, Comic Books in the Holocaust, Reefer Madness, Super Weird Heroes, Preposterous But True, that's the second volume of Super Weird Heroes, Super Patriotic Heroes, The Best of Don Winslow of the Navy, and most recently, Great Treasury of Christmas Comics.
Man is busy.
Yeah, and great stuff.
Yeah, and he loves comics. Like, that's the thing. He loves comics. He loves a variety of comics and making sure that they're kind of, I don't know. It's one of those things that I know we've talked a little bit, or I've talked about it, where, when I was a kid, I'd read the Overstreet Price Guide, and there'd be things in there, and I'd be like, oh, it seems like they were like these mystical texts that I would never see in my entire life. And, that's the kind of stuff Craig finds and collects and puts out.
Yeah. And I'm not even mentioning the Haunted Horror series.
Yeah, I really liked his. Was it? Oh, what was that book called? Was it Public House? It came out at the end of last year. It wasn't Public House. It was who published Jungle Comics and Space Comics, and you interviewed the author of that too.
Oh yeah. Not Public House, but I can't remember
Something
the publisher.
like
Yeah. But yeah, really great stuff. And he's got some interesting things coming out early next year. I think in January we have the Unknown Anti-War comics, and then he has a Jungle Girl comics volume coming out later in the year.
Mm-hmm. Fiction House.
That's it. Fiction House.
There you go. Google, you're my friend.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm thankful for what Craig does. Mm-hmm. And I always like to hang out with him as much as I can at Heroes Con, because he's been there for the past 3, maybe 4 years. Mm-hmm. And in fact, one of the things that I'm thankful for in terms of Craig is this past year, he let me hang out at his table, because we didn't have a comics alternative table this year. Mm-hmm. And so I could rest and hang out and keep my, stash at his table. And, one of the things he mentioned is he was kind of negative, thinking, I'm really not making as much money as I'd like, and I'm wondering how much longer I'm going to be doing this. But, mm-hmm. I'm sure he's going to be around for quite a while.
He puts out so many books. It's mind blowing to me.
Yeah. And great quality books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cause that always, at Heroes Con, I always go by his table. I try to buy a thing or two from him every year, but he's always got a big space, and it's just chock full of stuff, mm-hmm. like all these amazing books.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thankful for Craig and what he does.
Well, while we're on publishers, I think I'll be thankful for, I won't pick one out in particular, but I really like kind of the Kickstarter thing with publishers that are kind of picking up on it and doing like publication year type drives through Kickstarter. This year I supported a couple. I try to support a couple, or at least 3. It depends on what's offered. But this year I did the Kilgore Press books, and I did the Birdcage Bottom, and I really liked what I got from both of them. We got lots of different comics.
Retrofit?
Maybe I would. Oh, Retrofit too. Yeah, Retrofit does it too, and I think Koyama Press, does she do it? I don't remember if she does it or not.
I don't think so.
No, maybe she doesn't. But those 3 definitely do. Yeah, Retrofit is the third one. I couldn't remember. I was blanking. So thank you. I'm thankful for that. You remember things that I remember. But yeah, there was one book. I think it was from Birdcage Bottom called "In the Future We Are All Dead," and it was just like this crazy set of short stories that. By this German woman named Eva, I'm going to guess it's Mueller. Mm-hmm. That I really was knocked out by that. And I think Kilgore Press did Monkey Chef that you talked to. I know you talked to Mike Freiheit.
Right.
At I think you talked to him at Heroes Con, actually.
Yep, this past year, yeah.
See, but I really like that book. I read a bunch of Blammo that I hadn't read. From Noah Van Sciver, so I really like those. I mean, there's just so many things. I'm in the midst of reading Matinee Junkie by Jordan Jeffries. I'm mixing all the publishers' titles up, but there's just so many things out there that I like titles that probably I would not notice otherwise. Like there's a lot that I've been attending to more of late, but. A lot of things get published and I don't realize that they're out there. And I'm really glad that those publishers are kind of taking that platform to put out and advertise and fund really their books, because it's given me a lot more opportunity to kind of see what's out there. So I think it makes them a lot more visible, which is probably a big win for them. Mm-hmm. But it's putting a lot of good comics in my hands, which is a win for me. So I'm excited that that's still going on. And I'm thankful for it.
Well, the next thing that I'm thankful for is probably idiosyncratic, because most of our listeners don't know this shop and won't be able to visit the shop. But I'm thankful for Heroes Aren't Hard to Find, the people who put on Heroes Con. And one of the reasons I mentioned this year is that Sheldon has allowed us to start doing the on-location shows at Heroes. And so they're very kind. Plus, it's an incredible shop.
Yeah, it is. I went once just to, I was like, they put on Heroes Con. What's their shop like? And I was like, I'm lucky I don't live in Charlotte. Be broker.
Yeah. So I'm thankful for Heroes Aren't Hard to Find.
Yeah, I'm thankful that they put on Heroes Con too. It's a great show. And like, it seems to me that certain people that work there end up being kind of like, kind of prominent comics creators or like interesting ones. I think Matt Fraction worked there.
Yeah.
Renzo Rico. I follow him. He's a colorist, I think, but I really like the stuff that he works on.
I think he just recently left the shop though.
Yeah, I think so too. That's why he rings a bell with me. And they just seem to support certain, there's certain artists that are kind of in the area whose work I like that they kind of, they're kind of like cheerleaders for them. And I like that, I grew up in New York. So there's a part of me that's like, the comics are all from New York. But it's not true. And the comics are from all over. And I'm glad that they're kind of here, with their using their megaphone to kind of focus on the folks that are here putting out good stuff.
Yeah. So if our listeners, if you're in Charlotte, be sure to check out Heroes Aren't Hard to Find. They're on Pecan Avenue.
There you go. See, I like my comic shop. Should I give him I'll give him a shot. I'm thankful for my guy because he saves my comics. What's
the shop called?
It's called The Comic Experience. It's in Knoxville, Tennessee, and it's on Chapman Highway. And he's got a spiffy new sign that's got a whole bunch of like superhero hands on it, like fists up in the air. So like there's a Wonder Woman and a whole, like you could see, you look at it, it's Marvel and DC. But he covers a lot of different things. It's not Heroes, but it's not in Charlotte. But he's got a great dollar bin in the back. He's got a great selection of comics in the front, and he's been really good about ordering things, like even things that I'm particular for that he might not get a whole bunch of. So I'm really thankful for them and what they do.
So we're thankful for our local shops.
Yeah, support your local comic shop.
But also go to Discount Comic Book Service, our sponsor.
See, there's so many good comics out there. You could go to all these places and help everyone out. Yeah, and you know what? I'm thankful. I'm going to say this, and I'm not going to say this in a way to kiss up to you, but I'm thankful for this podcast because I'm thankful for you, Derek, for asking me to join you here.
And you're a big part of it now.
Well, that's why I'm trying not to kiss it because it's only I'm fairly new, but it's pushed me in different ways to read stuff that maybe I would not have read, and I really enjoy that. Podcasting in general is just a different way of interacting with people with whatever. I mean, I'm used to writing, and writing is such like a solitary like thing, and you don't know you put it out in the world, you don't know if it's going to go out there or how it's going to be received or whatnot. I mean, podcasting is like that too, but it's a lot more immediately gratifying to be like, oh yeah, we talked about this and now it's there. Plus, I get to talk to you, and I appreciate you, and I'm thankful for your friendship and your just bouncing ideas around together.
Thank you.
Well,
I'm thankful that you're a part of the podcast now.
Thank you. It's like I don't get to go and talk at the comic shop all the time, and so this is like that for me. Except for we get to share with everyone.
So that's right.
So they can turn me off when they don't want to hear a word. Turn me on.
Well, another thing I'm thankful for this year is the fact that Jason Lutz's Berlin was finally completed. And, I had him on the show for an interview a few months ago. That is such an incredible story.
Oh, yeah.
And, I had kept up, because I would get the individual issues of Berlin whenever they came out, and they would come out sporadically at times. And I kept up with it for a while. Then I stopped, and I was waiting for everything to be completed. Finally, it is. Have you read the complete Berlin?
I have read the very first volume, and I have been waiting to catch up, and now is the time, apparently, for that to happen. I really loved it. Like you said, I'm impressed with people when they stick with a title or a work like that for as long as he has. just because, and you know, like you said, it came out, some of it longer than others. I didn't buy the individual issues, but I'm thankful that it's, I don't know. I think even today, you know, that story is necessary just to kind of remind people of history, and how things happen and don't happen. And it's not just some kind of magical, like, oh yeah, this is just, you know, people took care of it. It's like, no, people actually have to take care of things before they get out of hand.
Right. And you're right. Given the times that we're living in now, where nationalism is, you know, so prominent and all over the world, including this country, and I won't mention any names, but, you know, our listeners know what I'm referring to or whom I'm referring to. But yeah, it's something that's very pertinent today as a narrative.
Yeah. It's like a kind of insidious, subtle, gradual thing. It's not like suddenly the bad guys just show up and they're like, hey, yeah, things are horrible. And you can look at them and go, oh yeah, you're horrible. It takes a long time to get there. Or a short time, but you don't notice it.
Is there anything else you're thankful for this year?
What am I thankful for?
Because I've got one more thing.
I have two. One is related to the show, and that is just for kind of just review copies, which sounds like a crazy thing, but it's new to me. I mean, being part of this podcast has just been like a boon, because every, you know, 2 or 3 times a week, it seems, some weeks, just I get a package I didn't expect, and it's got a book in it that's awesome. Yeah. And that's amazing. I mean, it saves me at the bank, but it also is just kind of beautiful. So I don't, you know, this has been a beautiful thing. Yeah.
It's one of the fringe benefits of, I mean, not only podcasting, but media reviewing. Is you do get that. Now, the problem with that is
storage.
I have no idea where I'm going to put the things that I've gotten this year alone. And I, you know, could give them away like to libraries or whatnot, but you know, most of them are texts that, you know, I'd like to keep if I can. So thank you, publishers.
Yes, thank you. You guys are awesome. Oh, this is something that just occurred to me because I was thinking about books and storage, and I was thinking about that Scratches anthology, which is really big and hard to store, but beautiful, and something I do want to keep for a long time. We talked about that Andy Warhol weird thing in it by that artist called Typex. And Self-Made Hero just put out that book. Apparently there's a whole Andy Warhol book now that I guess that's an excerpt from. So just so you know, because that just occurred to me.
And Self-Made Hero is one of those publishers that's been very generous. I mean, there are many who have done that, but Self-Made Hero especially.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They put out some beautiful books and things I really like.
Well, the last thing I wanted to mention, and this may sound a little weird, but I'm thankful for wonderful creators like Kyler Roberts and Glennis Fox, who are also wonderful, great, warm people. And I say this because I think I had met Kyler before once at an SPX, but this year when I went to SPX, not only did I work with Kyler and Glennis, among others, on a panel, but I hung out with them. And they would contact me and said, hey, we're going to dinner. You want to go? God, just wonderful, nice people.
Yeah, so
that's... When creators are good people in addition to great artists and writers, that makes a difference. Because, you know, not all creators are warm. And I understand that because people are different.
Oh, sure.
But, you know, and I say creators like Kyler and Glennis because there are others out there, but I wanted to emphasize Kyler and Glennis because I had such a good time hanging out with them at SPX this year.
Yeah, and I'll echo that too. I mean, part of being on this podcast is, you know, I've had a chance to talk to a lot more comics people kind of individual in those interviews. And I'm thankful that I get to take part in that. And people have been like, it's one of those things that I've always been kind of loath to kind of meet people who make things I like, because if they're jerks, then I'm going to be like, it kind of take the tracks from the thing. And like you said, I don't think that they're necessarily jerks. It's just that people respond to the public different. I mean, it's like I'm a total stranger, and it's like when you make a work, like I make a connection to it, and that's in my head. That's not in the creator's head. And then you meet a person and you're like, oh, and I don't know how they respond to that or take that in or don't want to, that's up to them. That's a very personal thing. So yeah, I've been pleasantly surprised by how fun it's been and how nice and welcoming and kind of, just kind of genial and accepting people have been. So I agree. I'm similarly thankful for cool comics creators like the people you mentioned.
Now you say you have one other thing you'd like to mention?
I do, and that is I'm thankful. I have a couple of doc students I'm working with that are doing things with comics, and one's doing a project with deaf students and how they read comics, and she's kind of doing this eye tracking thing with it to kind of try to map how they look through and navigate individual pages in comics. And to me, I'm like, it's kind of amazing. And I'm real thankful because, I don't know, I feel like sometimes I run out of ideas or things to talk about. Like, I like talking about comics, and I don't often think about, like, the stuff I should be doing in terms of work with comics, in terms of research and my day job. So I'm real thankful that I have students that kind of push me and are energetic and have cool ideas. And I'm real kind of glad to see them kind of go through. This is not something people can access. This is really a personal thing. But at some point they'll publish, and I'll try to share that too, so that other people can share in my enthusiasm.
Cool.
I'm also thankful for books that are coming out. That's what I'll say. That's my last thing. Because Image, this year through the podcast, I've but I've read things like we just read My Heroes Have Always Been Junkies, and we were going to talk about for Halloween that Witches series, and I read those comics, and those are some really good comics, and they have new series coming out in the future. So I'm thankful that not only are there good comics, there's a lot more good comics to look forward to that are coming down the pike.
Hey, Mr. Turkey, your working days are done. It's Thanksgiving, the table's set for fun. As we count our blessings one by one. Happy holiday, Thanksgiving holiday, from all of us to you.
So there you have it, our 2018 Thanksgiving episode, where both Sterg and I have talked about what we're thankful for in terms of comics and comics culture. And this is a great list, both of us, I think. I've had fun talking about this stuff.
Yeah, me too. I hope I didn't ramble too much.
Yeah.
Huh? No, I'm just going to leave it there.
Okay. And if you want to find great discounts on many of the comics that we mentioned on this show, then please go to the website of our sponsor, which is Discount Comic Book Service. Go to dcbservice.com. They will take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs. Go there. It's imperative right now.
It is dcbsservice.com.
That's right.
Well, yeah. Go there now.
Yes. And if you want to tell us what you've been thankful for this year in terms of comics, then get in touch with us. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you could leave us a voice message online via SpeakPipe. Or you can call us the old-fashioned way by picking up your phone and dialing 4153-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
Or you can email us at twoguys@comicsalternative.com. Or you can just email me at sturge@comicsalternative.com.
Or me at derek@comicsalternative.com. And we're all over social media, so you can contact us that way. We have accounts on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, YouTube, Slack, and Discord. You can subscribe to the podcast through Apple Podcasts. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can also find us on Google Podcasts, on TuneIn, and on iHeartRadio. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the various reviews and comics-related commentary that we've posted on our blog in the past, by going to the website, comicsalternative.com.
This sounds exciting. I'm just going to listen to the podcast and eat turkey tomorrow.
That's right. Well, Sturge, I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Same to you, Derek.
Yes, and we hope all of our listeners have great Thanksgivings as well.
Mm-hmm. Until
next week, I'm Derek.
And I'm Sturge.
Take care.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Gobble, gobble, gobble.
Yeah, gobble, gobble.
Hey, what happened?